Ethiopia has announced completion for controversial power dam on the River Nile that drew the fire of Egypt and Sudan. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, launched in 2011 with a $4 billion budget, is considered Africa's largest hydroelectric project.
Africa just witnessed history. Ethiopia has completed the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the largest hydropower project the continent has ever seen. A $4 billion megastructure now towers over the Blue Nile, promising power for millions and rewriting Africa's energy future. But why is this dam so controversial? How did Ethiopia pull off such a massive project on its own? And what does it mean for Africa's future? Let's find out. The air in Addis Ababa was electric as the announcement came through. Ethiopia has officially completed the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD, the single largest hydropower project on the African continent. For years, the dam was a dream suspended between fierce ambition and geopolitical tension, yet today it stands as a concrete and steel reality, humming with the power of 11 massive turbines and holding back one of the most strategic rivers in the world. This is not just another infrastructure project. It is the culmination of 14 years of relentless work and unwavering belief in self-sufficiency. What makes this moment truly extraordinary is how Ethiopia chose to finance and build it. Unlike other mega projects across Africa, funded heavily by foreign loans and tied to external influence, GERD was fueled largely by Ethiopia's people. Teachers, farmers, business owners, and citizens across the country contributed money to help build the dam. Diaspora Ethiopians sent funds home. Government bonds were purchased not as financial investments, but as a national duty. This wasn't just an engineering project, it was a social movement, something deeply personal to the Ethiopian people. Now, with the dam completed, Ethiopia is not simply producing electricity, it is reshaping its future. 6 of the turbines are already operational, feeding power into the national grid and bringing light to millions who previously lived in darkness. When all 11 turbines are fully online, the dam is expected to generate 6,450 megawatts of power, more than doubling Ethiopia's existing energy supply. This level of production is transformative. No longer will Ethiopian industries be throttled by blackouts or limited by expensive, unreliable fuel-based energy. Instead, GERD positions Ethiopia as a net exporter of power, with potential customers in Sudan, Kenya, and Djibouti already lined up to tap into this new stream of clean energy. But the story does not end with engineering triumphs and economic prospects. The completion of GERD instantly alters the geopolitical dynamics of the region. Egypt, a nation heavily dependent on the Nile for over 90% of its freshwater needs, has long considered any upstream projects on the river a potential threat to its water security. For Cairo, GERD is not merely a dam. It is a shift in control, a structural change in who commands the flow of the Nile. Sudan, too, although benefiting from cheaper electricity, has raised concerns about how reservoir management might affect seasonal water flows. These fears have escalated into years of strained negotiations, high-level summits, and even open military rhetoric. Yet Ethiopia has remained firm, framing GERD as a project of peace and development, not conflict. It has repeatedly assured downstream countries that the dam will not reduce their access to water and will instead stabilize the flow, reducing the risk of floods and droughts that have historically wreaked havoc on Nile Basin agriculture. For many in Africa, Ethiopia's determination to complete GERD, despite political pressure, has become symbolic of a growing continental sentiment, the belief that Africa can and must take control of its resources and destiny. International reactions have been mixed. Some hail GERD as a shining example of what African nations can achieve when they prioritize internal financing and resist dependency on external actors. Others warn that disputes over transboundary water resources could spiral if diplomacy fails. But no matter where one stands, the facts are clear. The dam is complete, the turbines are spinning, and a new chapter has begun not just for Ethiopia, but for Africa's development ambitions as a whole. This moment raises deeper questions. How did Ethiopia manage to overcome years of funding challenges, technical difficulties, and political threats to complete this project? What sacrifices and choices paved the way for this day? And what exactly does this dam mean for the millions of Ethiopians who helped pay for it? The completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD did not happen in a smooth, straight line. It is easy to look at the gleaming structure now and assume the journey was inevitable. But for Ethiopia, every year of construction was a fight against obstacles that could have brought the project to a halt. The road to completion was long, turbulent, and deeply symbolic of a country determined to turn vision into reality, no matter the odds. The first challenge that appeared immediately after the foundation was laid in 2011: money. Large-scale infrastructure of this magnitude often leans heavily on foreign investment or global financial institutions, but Ethiopia deliberately chose to avoid external dependency. Instead, it launched one of Africa's largest domestic funding campaigns. Civil servants pledged portions of their salaries. The diaspora community bought bonds not for profit, but out of patriotism. Rural farmers contributed despite living hand to mouth. In the early years, many international observers dismissed the project as unrealistic, arguing that a country with Ethiopia's economic limitations could never finance something so colossal on its own. But that skepticism only fueled the determination of the Ethiopian public. Then came the engineering hurdles. Building a 145-meter-high, 1.8-kilometer-long dam on the Blue Nile required not just financial commitment, but also technical expertise. Ethiopia had never before undertaken a project of this scale, and much of the necessary infrastructure, roads, machinery, and even skilled personnel had to be brought in or trained from scratch. The remote location of Benishangul Gumuz added another layer of difficulty, with harsh terrain and logistical challenges making transport of heavy equipment a nightmare. International contractors had to work hand in hand with Ethiopian engineers, many of whom were trained on the job, to develop skills that did not previously exist within the country. Over time, this created a new generation of local experts who now stand as one of GERD's least recognized but most important legacies. While financial and engineering challenges could be measured and managed, political pressure was a far more unpredictable threat. From its inception, GERD attracted scrutiny from downstream nations, particularly Egypt, which viewed the project as a potential threat to its lifeline, the Nile. Statements from Cairo repeatedly painted the dam as an existential issue, and diplomatic tension occasionally escalated into open threats. In one particularly tense period, military posturing raised fears that the dispute could spill into open conflict. For Ethiopia, this meant that completing GERD was not just about pouring concrete, but about defending its right to develop and exercise sovereignty over its natural resources. These pressures slowed construction at key moments, delaying turbine installations and testing phases. Add to this the internal difficulties Ethiopia faced, ranging from shifting political administrations to periods of social unrest, and the fact that GERD ever reached completion becomes even more remarkable. There were moments when funding temporarily dried up, when supply chains broke down, and when the morale of workers faltered under the sheer weight of expectations. Yet the project pushed forward, one stage at a time, with setbacks becoming catalysts for new strategies rather than roadblocks. An often overlooked chapter in this journey was the human cost. Thousands of workers spent years living in remote camps, enduring extreme weather, isolation from families, and at times dangerous working conditions. Entire communities were relocated to make way for the reservoir, sparking debates about fair compensation and cultural displacement. These sacrifices rarely make headlines, yet they are at the core of what GERD represents. Not simply an engineering achievement, but a national endeavor built on resilience and, at times, painful compromise. By 2025, when the last turbine was installed and final testing completed, the sense of triumph in Ethiopia was profound. The completion was not just a victory over physical and financial limitations, but also a statement to the world. Ethiopia had endured every kind of resistance, economic, political, and social, and still delivered one of the most significant infrastructure projects in Africa's history. This long and difficult journey sets the stage for a bigger question. What exactly makes GERD so transformative for Ethiopia and the wider African continent? That is what we explore next. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. When the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam GERD began producing power, it wasn't just an Ethiopian story anymore. It became a continental event. What makes GERD so transformative is not only its scale, but also its ripple effects across Africa's economic, social, and political landscape. It is a rare moment when one project can influence an entire region, altering how nations see energy, development, and even sovereignty. The most immediate impact is energy security. For decades, power shortages have crippled African economies, with blackouts shutting down factories, hospitals, and schools, often for days at a time. Ethiopia itself has been no stranger to this problem, with limited energy forcing industries to rely on expensive diesel generators or simply halt production altogether. GERD changes that dynamic overnight. With its 6,450 megawatt capacity, Ethiopia can now produce more electricity than its domestic population requires, creating an energy surplus that can be exported to neighboring countries. This export potential is critical. East Africa has long struggled with uneven energy access. While countries like Kenya have invested in renewable sources, others, such as Sudan and Djibouti, continue to face chronic shortages. GERD enables Ethiopia to become an energy hub, selling power through the Eastern Africa Power Pool, which integrates multiple national grids. Cheaper, cleaner electricity reduces reliance on fossil fuels, cutting carbon emissions and supporting Africa's commitments to climate adaptation. For industries across the region, lower energy costs mean lower production costs, which directly translates into job creation, competitive exports, and more stable economies. But GERD's influence goes beyond economics. It represents a psychological and political turning point. For decades, Africa's narrative around large infrastructure was often tied to external actors. Major dams and power plants were usually financed and built by foreign powers, often carrying strings attached. GERD flips that script entirely. It was funded primarily by Ethiopians and built largely under Ethiopian management. That independence resonates across the continent, especially among nations seeking to reduce foreign dependency. This sense of self-reliance feeds into continental ambitions like the African Continental Free Trade Area (AFCFTA). Reliable, affordable electricity is one of the prerequisites for industrial growth and cross-border trade, both of which are central to AFCFTA's success. GERD positions Ethiopia, and by extension East Africa, to play a leading role in Africa's industrialization drive. It demonstrates that Africa doesn't have to wait for outside saviors. It can take control of its economic destiny. There is also a strategic dimension to GERD's influence. Control over energy means leverage. By supplying electricity to neighboring countries, Ethiopia gains new political and economic influence in East Africa. Power lines are more than just wires. They are lifelines connecting economies. When countries rely on Ethiopia for energy, it deepens regional integration, but also shifts the balance of power. Traditionally, Egypt's control over Nile waters has given it disproportionate influence in the region. With GERD now operational, Ethiopia becomes a counterweight, signaling a multipolar shift within the Nile basin. GERD's impact on Africa's environmental future is equally significant. Hydropower, while not without environmental challenges, produces far fewer emissions than coal or oil-based energy. With climate change already affecting rainfall patterns and agricultural output in Africa, transitioning to renewable energy sources is not a choice, but a necessity. GERD contributes directly to reducing Africa's carbon footprint, aligning with global climate goals, while also creating a template for other African nations exploring similar projects. Perhaps most importantly, GERD has become a symbol of what is possible. Across the continent, policymakers and citizens alike are seeing that African nations can successfully plan and execute massive projects, even when faced with political opposition and financial constraints. It challenges the old narrative that Africa must choose between ambition and stability. GERD shows that, with determination and strategic vision, both are possible. Yet these opportunities come with responsibility. Managing the benefits of GERD requires careful diplomacy, environmental monitoring, and equitable distribution of power revenues. But if done right, it is no exaggeration to say that GERD could inspire a wave of African-led infrastructure projects that change not just economies, but entire societies. And that raises an even deeper question. How does this single dam, born from national ambition, affect long-standing regional tensions and environmental concerns? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. For all its promise, the GERD is not just a story of engineering triumph, it is also a lightning rod for regional tension and environmental scrutiny. Even as Ethiopia celebrates its achievement, neighboring nations remain wary, and environmental experts continue to debate what this massive alteration of the Blue Nile will mean for ecosystems and communities. The most visible fault line lies between Ethiopia and Egypt. The Nile is Egypt's lifeblood, providing over 90% of its fresh water for drinking, farming, and industry. For decades, Egypt has maintained a position of near-complete control over Nile waters, rooted in colonial-era treaties that gave it preferential rights. GERD fundamentally disrupts that arrangement. By building a dam capable of storing 74 billion cubic meters of water, Ethiopia has, in the eyes of many Egyptians, seized control of their future. This fear has translated into aggressive rhetoric and diplomatic pressure. Cairo has repeatedly demanded legally binding agreements that dictate how fast Ethiopia fills the reservoir and how much water must always flow downstream. Ethiopia, however, argues that GERD is a run-of-the-river dam, designed to generate electricity without permanently consuming water. In Addis Ababa's view, the dam benefits everyone by stabilizing river flow, preventing destructive flooding, and reducing the impact of drought cycles that have historically devastated farmers in both Ethiopia and Sudan. Sudan's position is complex. While it stands to benefit from cheaper electricity and regulated water flow, it has also raised concerns about sudden operational decisions by Ethiopia that could affect its own dams and irrigation systems. These disputes have led to years of high-stakes negotiations. The African Union has stepped in multiple times to mediate, while world powers have occasionally weighed in, fearing that unresolved Nile disputes could escalate into conflict. Though tensions have not erupted into open warfare, the rhetoric at times has been alarmingly hostile, with threats of all options on the table fueling public anxiety. The challenge ahead lies in building trust, something difficult to achieve when national survival narratives clash with development ambitions. Beyond diplomacy, environmental questions loom large. A project of this magnitude inevitably alters ecosystems. By holding back such an enormous volume of water, GERD changes sediment flow downstream, potentially affecting soil fertility in Sudan and Egypt, which rely on seasonal deposits to enrich farmlands. Critics argue that this could require farmers to rely more heavily on fertilizers, increasing costs and changing traditional agricultural practices. The reservoir itself, now one of the largest artificial lakes in Africa, has submerged vast tracts of land, displacing communities and altering local biodiversity. Entire villages were relocated, often under tight timelines and with promises of compensation that some residents claim were insufficient or delayed. Environmentalists worry about the impact on aquatic life, with changes in water temperature and flow potentially affecting fish populations both upstream and downstream. Additionally, there are concerns about increased evaporation from the vast surface area of the reservoir, which could result in water losses in a region already facing climate stress. Ethiopia has responded to these criticisms by emphasizing the broader environmental benefits. GERD will reduce reliance on fossil fuels, cutting emissions significantly, and supporting Africa's transition to renewable energy. It also promises to regulate the river, mitigating extreme floods that can wipe out crops and infrastructure in heavy rainfall years. Still, experts caution that without careful, transparent management of reservoir levels and downstream releases, unintended ecological consequences could outweigh these benefits. This balance between opportunity and risk is at the heart of GERD's future. How Ethiopia handles its newfound control of Nile waters, how downstream countries adjust their expectations, and how environmental concerns are addressed will determine whether GERD is remembered as a symbol of harmony and growth or as a trigger for regional instability and ecological strain. These challenges force us to confront one last critical question. Is GERD a sign that Africa is entering a new era of self-reliance and ambition, one mirrored by leaders beyond Ethiopia itself? To answer that, we turn to a broader continental awakening, where figures like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré are rewriting the narrative of African independence and development. The GERD is more than a hydropower project. It is a signal that Africa is stepping into a new era of self-reliance and ambition. For decades, much of the continent's infrastructure story has been tied to external financing and outside influence. GERD disrupts that pattern entirely. It is financed largely by Ethiopian citizens, managed within Ethiopia's borders, and designed to serve African needs first. That independence has sparked something larger, a continental conversation about what is possible when African nations take ownership of their resources and development paths. Across Africa, leaders and citizens alike are looking at GERD as proof that a new model is emerging, one where infrastructure is not simply imported, funded, and controlled by foreign entities, but rather envisioned and executed from within. This model is not just about pride, it's about strategy. Africa holds some of the richest natural resources on Earth, yet historically, these resources have flowed outward while development stagnated inward. Projects like GERD change that equation. By harnessing one of Africa's most powerful rivers, Ethiopia is not only producing electricity, but also reshaping regional trade, industrial capacity, and even political leverage. This mindset is not limited to Ethiopia. In West Africa, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré has emerged as a powerful advocate of African self-sufficiency. His policies, though focused on a different set of priorities, echo the spirit of GERD, rejecting dependency, investing in local capacity, and using national resources to fuel homegrown development. Traoré's administration has pushed aggressively for agricultural independence, investing in local rice production to replace imports, building food storage and processing facilities, and cutting reliance on foreign aid. These efforts have already allowed Burkina Faso to begin supplying food to neighboring countries, shifting from an import-dependent economy to an emerging regional food exporter. Traoré has also overseen bold moves in the industrial sector, including the construction of Burkina Faso's first state-backed gold refinery and new initiatives in energy diversification. While Burkina Faso's projects differ in scale from Ethiopia's massive hydropower endeavor, the underlying principle is the same. African countries can and should design their future, controlling the full chain of production and resisting the external pressures that often come with aid and foreign capital. What ties GERD and Traoré's policies together is their focus on long-term sovereignty rather than short-term relief. GERD was controversial not just because of water politics, but because it represented a refusal to conform to decades-old regional power structures. Similarly, Traoré has taken bold positions internationally, calling for economic policies that prioritize African interests over those dictated by former colonial powers or global financial institutions. Both approaches are disruptive, and both have sparked debate, but they have also energized populations that see, perhaps for the first time in generations, tangible evidence of what leadership rooted in self-determination can achieve. These parallel stories are part of a wider African awakening. Across the continent, from infrastructure to agriculture to digital technology, there is growing momentum toward building domestic capacity and reducing reliance on external control. GERD's turbines spinning on the Blue Nile and Burkina Faso's gold refinery operating in Ouagadougou may seem worlds apart, but they are chapters of the same narrative, Africa choosing its trajectory. The question now is whether this awakening will spread, and whether African nations can manage the balance between ambition and stability. GERD offers massive opportunities, but also requires careful diplomacy to avoid conflict with neighbors. Traoré's policies deliver economic wins, but also invite external resistance from powers that benefit from the status quo. Yet, these are the growing pains of sovereignty, painful, but necessary for a continent seeking its place in a changing world order. In the end, GERD is more than an Ethiopian achievement, and Traoré's push for independence is more than national policy. Together, they represent an Africa that is no longer content to be shaped by external interests, but is instead shaping itself, one bold decision at a time. Do you think Africa is finally breaking free from foreign control? Can projects like GERD and Traoré's reforms inspire the rest of the continent? Let us know in the comments section. Is this the beginning of a truly self-reliant Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.